Have you ever heard of a doorknob conversation? It's what doctors describe when people go for an appointment and then just as they leave and people touch the doorknob, they reveal what they really came about. I kind of feel like I had one of those with Audrey Wiggin. Audrey is a brilliant coach. I've seen her speak and talk about what she does, and I set up a call with her to explore some of the issues around deep work and our habits and how to be productive in these tricky times. And we had that conversation. But Audrey also identified something that really triggered a recognition in my mind, which was lockdown trauma. But let's start with where I thought this conversation was going.
I think number one is you need to do an audit as to actually who you are Zooming with. I would recommend you write down on a piece of paper, what are your 5 priorities for your work for the next, say, 6 to 12 months, and just write them down, 5 boxes. Then take a snapshot of your diary for next week and go through meeting by meeting and just put which meeting corresponds to which priority. I did this with a client the other day and he was absolutely horrified because he realized that 2 of his key priorities, the things that his boss really cares about, he didn't have a single meeting in his calendar next week for those. And then he said, what do I do with, there are about 15 meetings that don't fit into any of these 5 priorities. And he said, that seems to be where I'm spending all my time. And we actually went through them and realized that a whole bunch of them he could delegate to his team members. That would be a way of empowering them, growing them, giving them more responsibility. And there were 1 or 2 that were absolute ones he had to do. And then there were several where he said, actually, nobody needs to go to those at all. I've just been invited in this sort of, general inclusion. So do an audit, find out where you're actually spending your time. And if you're not spending your time on your priorities, then you need to rejig that or rejig your priorities. I would definitely recommend reading a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. He talks about deep work as the kind of work you do. This is your really best quality, the kind of work that gets you promoted, the kind of work that gets you noticed. And if you're going to do that kind of really high quality thinking type work, then you need to put aside the time and you need to do it without distraction. The only way you're really going to get proper thinking work done is to turn off your distractions. So number 1, do not have notifications binging up on your screen. I would go as far to say as turn your phone off, or at the very least put it on silent and somewhere out of hand's reach. Turn your browser off so you can't just have a quick, I'll just flick to my email and see there might be something important that's come in. Actually turn it off so that the hassle of reopening it is enough to stop that reflex action. And just say to yourself, I'm going to put 45 minutes aside and I'm going to do some really proper thinking work. Take a break, go back, do another 45-minute chunk. Even if that's all you manage to do, that hour and a half of work will be so much better quality having not been distracted. I think it's really helpful just to think about your commute time. So say you spent 45 minutes on a train. Yes, some of that you would have spent working. You might have been reading your emails or reading a book or reading a paper or something. But some of it you wouldn't have been, and you would have been walking to the station or faffing around. Reclaim that time and say, actually, I'm going to use that 20 minutes to do an exercise class or just take a walk around the block. And I think the most important thing is to make it a habit. So 40 to 50% of what we do every day, we do out of habit. So if you genuinely want exercise to be part of your day, you've got to make it a habit. There's a brilliant book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'd recommend it. And he talks about you've got to do something for 2 minutes and start really small. So instead of saying to yourself, I'm going to do yoga every day for 30 minutes, he would say, get your yoga mat out every day. Like, just start small. And he tells a story of someone where he says this guy had quite a lot of weight to lose and was told, just drive to the gym every day. You don't actually have to go in, just drive there every day and make driving to the gym a habit. And this guy did it every day for 2 weeks. Then after a while, he said, you know what, I'm here now, I might as well do it. So he just did 10 minutes of exercise every day. Anyway, the bloke apparently lost 120 pounds. Corona's going to be here for a lot longer. I heard this morning Bill Gates has said, till the end of 2021, life is still going to be very strange. So if we don't get to grips with this now, there's going to be some very long-term mental health effects. So actually, we have to get to a place where we can say, yeah, by 7 o'clock, I turn the screen off.
And now on to the doorknob conversation. As we closed down the call, Audrey said that she had noticed that some of the people she works with are traumatised or have a trauma from lockdown. Let's hear how she describes it.
I think there are a group of women out there who are all in very full-on, quite high-powered jobs, and many of them with children, some with partners who are getting involved. And one lady was saying, split it absolutely 50-50, others less so. But I think what they experienced from April to July with homeschooling their children, one particular lady I spoke to, her business was in danger of going under, an enormous global corporation, but with a big retail presence, never had to work so hard in her life, work-wise, plus the children. And she sort of described it as almost, she's been through a trauma. I had another lady, very senior woman in finance world, saying similarly, she said, it's like this trauma that's happened to me and I've had no time to process or really undergo therapy to work out quite what I walked into earlier on in this year. And what's interesting, I think they feel they're in a tiny minority, but actually I suspect this group of women is way, way bigger. And I think there are mothers who are almost kind of just kind of pausing for breath now, but knowing that any day the children could be sent home again. The trauma is still there and it's right at the surface, ready to reappear at any moment.
After Audrey said that, I started looking around and talking to people. And one of the first person I connected with was Caroline Pankhurst, who's also a coach. And she opened up the group that she sees as having been traumatised by lockdown. And she included single parents and people who were running businesses that were failing during this period and people in abusive domestic situations. But then I started to look further and I heard from men who were leading teams that they were having to make redundant, having panic attacks, having disturbed sleep, feeling, as one described it, like a close relative was dying and they were watching them dying as their business went down the pan. And it occurred to me that maybe lockdown trauma is something we need to look at more deeply and is more widespread than I had considered. I reached out to Sarah Clark, who's a psychotherapist that I've worked with before and you've heard from before. And Sarah had an interesting take on this. She said that trauma is something by definition that's a threat to life. And we're told again and again and again that COVID is a threat to life. She said that the responses that you expect from it are anger and anxiety and upset, and that's what we're seeing in people. And she also explains that it's a neurobiological response to things happening not on a one-off, spotting a tiger in the distance, but being forced to confront difficult and troubling things again and again and again. And it changes us. When she talks to children, she says we need to move out of our downstairs brain, which is very dark and very anxious, back into our more analytical upstairs brain. And if we can't do that, if we can't get out of these feelings of anxiety and helplessness and panic, then we really need to seek help for managing those feelings. I don't want to leave you with a negative. So I want to leave you with a thought that Caroline shared, which was that at the other side of this, we will be able to look around us and see people who were heroes, who really fought through this and who really coped and survived against the odds. And I really hope she's right. Look out for each other. I'll see you next week.